Sometimes the person you leave behind never stops trusting you, even after the entire world believes your story has ended. At exactly 12:17 a.m., the sharp vibration of Nathan Walker's phone shattered the silence of his penthouse overlooking downtown Chicago. The city below glowed with thousands of white and amber lights, but the 42-year-old billionaire soon barely noticed them anymore. He had spent the last 4 hours reviewing acquisition documents spread across the long walnut conference table in his private office. Another merger, another company, another headline waiting to be written in the morning. Success had become so routine that even victories no longer felt like celebrations. His phone continued vibrating across the polished wood. Nathan glanced at the unfamiliar number before almost ignoring it. Very few people possessed his private line. Those who did understood one simple rule. They never called after midnight unless someone was dying or the world was falling apart. He answered on the fourth ring. Nathan Walker speaking. The woman's voice on the other end remained calm, though exhaustion softened every word. Good evening, sir. This is Mercy General Hospital. I apologize for calling so late. Nathan immediately sat upright. Is something wrong? There was a brief pause filled only by distant hospital announcements echoing faintly through the phone. Sir, we are calling regarding Miss Claire Bennett. Nathan's heartbeat stopped for one impossible second. Claire Bennett. He had not heard that name spoken aloud in almost 6 years. 6 years since they had ended their relationship without ever truly explaining why. 6 years since both of them had convinced themselves that silence hurt less than another argument. 6 years since he had watched her walk away carrying a single suitcase without asking her to stay. Sir, the nurse asked gently. Nathan realized he had forgotten to answer. Yes, he finally whispered. I know Claire. The nurse continued carefully. Miss Bennett was admitted to our emergency department earlier tonight after experiencing a medical emergency. She is receiving care, and her condition is currently being evaluated. We are contacting you because... Her voice hesitated. Because you are listed as her only emergency contact. Nathan slowly stood from his chair. The words echoed through the quiet room louder than the city traffic 60 floors below. I am sorry, he said, believing he had misunderstood. Could you repeat that? According to the hospital records, sir, you are her only emergency contact. Nathan stared through the floor-to-ceiling windows without actually seeing the skyline anymore. His reflection looked back at him like someone else's face. That cannot be right, he murmured. There must be a mistake. We verified the information twice before contacting you. Your name, this phone number, and your authorization remain active in her file. Nathan closed his eyes. None of it made sense. Claire had every reason to erase him from her life. Why would she leave his name anywhere? Why had she never changed the paperwork? Had she simply forgotten? Or had something else happened that he never understood? Sir, the nurse asked again. Will you be able to come? Nathan did not answer immediately. Instead, memories arrived without permission. Claire laughing while burning pancakes in their tiny first apartment. Claire dancing barefoot in the kitchen because an old song came on the radio. Claire crying quietly the night they decided to separate because neither of them knew how to repair what had broken between them. He had buried those memories beneath board meetings, international flights, expensive suits, and impossible schedules. Yet one midnight phone call had unearthed every one of them. Nathan finally found his voice. How serious is her condition? The physicians are continuing their evaluation. We cannot discuss additional medical details over the phone until you arrive, but we felt it was important to contact you as quickly as possible. Nathan looked at the documents scattered across the table. Contracts worth billions of dollars suddenly appeared meaningless beside one unanswered question. Why was he still the only person Claire trusted to answer a hospital phone call in the middle of the night? He reached for his car keys without another thought. Somewhere across the city, a woman he had once loved was lying in a hospital bed, and somehow, after 6 long years of silence, the world had decided that he was still the first person who needed to know. Rain swept across the empty expressway as Nathan's black sedan cut through the sleeping city, windshield wipers moving in a steady rhythm that matched the questions racing through his mind. Every traffic light reflected across the wet pavement like broken pieces of memory scattered beneath the tires. He had driven this route hundreds of times for charity board meetings and fundraising events at Mercy General Hospital, but never had the building seem so distant. Claire's name refused to leave his thoughts. 6 years. 6 birthdays. 6 Christmas mornings spent pretending that moving forward meant forgetting. Yet somehow she had never removed his name from the one place that mattered most when everything went wrong. Nathan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He remembered the final conversation they had shared in the small townhouse they once rented together. Neither of them had shouted. Neither of them had blamed the other. Silence had simply settled between them until it became impossible to tell where love ended and loneliness began. When he arrived at the hospital, the emergency entrance glowed beneath rows of white lights that turned the rain into shimmering silver threads. A security officer directed him toward the reception desk after confirming his name. The overnight nurse looked up from her computer the moment he approached. Recognition crossed her face immediately. "Mr. Walker?" she asked. Nathan nodded. "You called me." She offered a sympathetic smile. "Thank you for coming so quickly. We know it is very late." Nathan glanced toward the hallway leading deeper into the hospital. "How is Claire?" The nurse lowered her voice. "She is stable, and the physicians are continuing to monitor her. She is resting now." Nathan released a slow breath he had not realized he was holding. "Can I see her?" The nurse hesitated gently. "Before that, there is someone waiting who has been asking whether you were really coming." Nathan frowned slightly. "Someone waiting for me?" Without answering directly, the nurse stepped from behind the desk and motioned for him to follow. They walked through quiet corridors where only distant monitors and soft footsteps disturbed the silence. The walls displayed colorful paintings created by young patients, bright reminders of hope inside a place built around uncertainty. As they turned one final corner, Nathan noticed a small pediatric family lounge illuminated by warm lamps instead of harsh fluorescent lights. Sitting alone on a blue fabric chair was a little girl no older than 5. She wore pink sneakers that dangled several inches above the floor and clutched a well-loved white stuffed rabbit against her chest. A half-finished coloring book rested beside her, its pages filled with smiling dinosaurs drawn in green and yellow crayons. She looked exhausted but refused to fall asleep. The nurse crouched beside her. "Grace," she said softly, "someone is here." The little girl slowly lifted her head. Large blue eyes settled on Nathan with cautious curiosity. She studied his face for several long seconds, almost as though comparing him to a memory she had carried in her imagination. Nathan remained frozen where he stood. Nothing about this night had prepared him for the sight of a frightened child waiting alone in the middle of the night. The nurse quietly stepped away, leaving the two of them facing one another across the room. Grace slid carefully off the chair, still hugging the stuffed rabbit tightly. She took 2 hesitant steps forward before stopping. Her small voice was barely louder than a whisper. "Are you Mr. Nathan?" He swallowed hard. "Yes." Grace nodded slowly, as if confirming something important to herself. "Mommy said if anything really bad ever happened." She looked down at the rabbit for courage before meeting his eyes again. "You would come." Nathan felt the air leave his lungs. Before he could answer, Grace asked one more question that seemed far too heavy for a child her age. "You came because you still care about her, didn't you?" Grace's question settled over the quiet family lounge with a weight no child should ever have carried. Nathan searched for an answer, but every honest response felt painfully incomplete. He slowly knelt until his eyes met hers. "Yes," he said softly. "I came as fast as I could." The little girl studied him for another moment before giving a tiny nod, as though confirming something her heart had already decided. "Mommy said you always keep your promises," she whispered. Nathan lowered his gaze, the words striking deeper than she could possibly understand. 6 years earlier, he had believed he had broken every promise that mattered. Yet somehow Claire had remembered him differently. Grace climbed back onto the blue chair, carefully smoothing the ears of her stuffed rabbit. "The nurses told me Mommy is sleeping," she said quietly. "They said she needs rest." Nathan pulled another chair closer and sat beside her. "They're going to take very good care of her." Grace looked toward the hallway leading to the treatment rooms. "I know." Her voice remained calm, almost unusually calm for someone so young. "She always tells me hospitals are full of people who help other people." Nathan noticed the coloring book lying open beside her. Every page was filled with cheerful animals wearing tiny doctor coats, bright balloons, and smiling suns. There was not a single dark crayon mark anywhere. Even here, surrounded by uncertainty, Claire had somehow raised a little girl who still colored the world with hope. A nurse quietly entered the lounge carrying 2 paper cups. She handed one to Nathan. "Coffee," she said gently. "You look like you could use it." He thanked her before asking the question that had been growing heavier with every passing minute. "How long has Grace been here alone?" The nurse glanced sympathetically toward the child. "Only for a short while. One of our pediatric volunteers stayed with her until we reached you. She has been incredibly brave." Nathan looked back at Grace. "Do you have any other family coming?" Grace shook her head. "Mommy said Grandma lives with Jesus now." She hugged the stuffed rabbit a little tighter. "And Grandpa got sick a long time ago." Nathan swallowed quietly. "What about friends?" "Miss Olivia from next door watches me sometimes." Grace smiled faintly. "But Mommy wrote your name on all the important papers." Nathan stared ahead without speaking. The nurse gently placed a thin folder on the table beside him. "These are the emergency authorization forms. Your name appears on every update Claire completed over the past several years." Nathan opened the folder with trembling hands. There it was in Claire's unmistakable handwriting. Nathan Walker, emergency contact, authorized medical decision maker, updated 8 months ago, updated 2 years earlier, updated 4 years earlier. Each form carried the same careful signature beneath his name. She had renewed the information again and again. It had never been an accident. Nathan closed the folder slowly, unable to understand why. After everything that had happened between them, why had Claire continued trusting him with the single responsibility that mattered most? Before he could ask another question, a physician entered the lounge wearing a navy scrub jacket and a reassuring expression. "Mr. Walker?" Nathan immediately stood. "Yes." The doctor extended his hand. "I am Dr. Harris. Claire is stable, and that is encouraging. We are waiting for additional test results before deciding on the next steps." Nathan nodded. "May I see her?" "In a few minutes. There is something I need to explain first." Dr. Harris glanced briefly toward Grace, making sure she remained happily focused on her coloring book. Then he lowered his voice. "When Claire arrived tonight, she was conscious for a short time. Before we began treatment, she repeated one request several times." Nathan felt his heartbeat quicken. "What did she say?" The doctor's expression softened. "She looked directly at us and said, 'Please make sure Nathan comes. He will know what to do.'" Nathan stood completely still, unable to reconcile the woman he thought had left him behind with the woman who had spoken those words only hours earlier. Somewhere beyond the closed doors of the treatment wing, Claire was resting peacefully, unaware that the trust she had quietly carried for 6 years had finally called him back into her life. Dr. Harris gently motioned for Nathan to follow him down the quiet hallway, leaving Grace in the care of the pediatric volunteer who immediately sat beside her with another coloring book and a fresh box of crayons. Nathan glanced back once before turning the corner. Grace smiled bravely and waved with the stuffed rabbit, as though she wanted him to know she would be fine for a little while. That small gesture stayed with him as they walked through the softly lit corridor. "She is an extraordinary little girl, Dr. Harris said quietly. Nathan nodded without taking his eyes off the hallway ahead. "She should not have to be this brave." The doctor slowed near a large window overlooking the rain-soaked parking lot below. "Children often surprise us," he replied. "Sometimes they become strong because the adults around them have no choice but to be." Nathan understood immediately whom the doctor meant. Claire had always carried other people's burdens before her own. Even when they were together, she volunteered extra shifts, remembered everyone's birthdays, and somehow found time to help neighbors who needed groceries or rides to appointments. She had always believed kindness was something you practiced, not something you talked about. Dr. Harris stopped beside a partially open door. "Before you see her, there is something I think you should know." Nathan looked toward the room where medical equipment quietly monitored the steady rhythm of recovery. "What is it?" The doctor folded his hands thoughtfully. "Claire has been bringing Grace here for regular pediatric visits for several years. We have gotten to know them rather well." Nathan listened in silence. Every time she completed admission paperwork or updated medical records, our staff asked if she wanted to change her emergency contact. We asked because many patients update those details after major life changes. Nathan already sensed where the conversation was leading, but hearing it aloud felt entirely different. "She never changed it," he said softly. Dr. Harris shook his head. "Not once." Nathan lowered his eyes. "Did she ever explain why?" The doctor smiled faintly. She usually answered with the same sentence. Nathan felt his heartbeat quicken. What did she say? Dr. Harris looked directly at him. She would smile and say, "If something truly matters, Nathan will come." The words landed with a quiet force that left Nathan speechless. 6 years had passed since he last held Claire's hand. 6 years since he believed she had completely closed the door on their shared life. Yet while he had buried himself in expanding companies and chasing success, Claire had quietly continued believing in him without ever asking anything in return. The doctor gently pushed the door open. "You may see her now, but please remember she is still resting." Nathan stepped inside slowly. The room was peaceful. Soft lighting replaced the bright intensity of the emergency department, and the steady sound of a heart monitor filled the silence with reassuring rhythm. Claire rested beneath a light hospital blanket, her face noticeably paler than he remembered, yet unmistakably familiar. A loose strand of blonde hair rested across her forehead exactly the way it always had whenever she worked too many hours without stopping to brush it back. Nathan quietly pulled a chair closer to the bedside and sat without making a sound. For several long moments, he simply watched her breathe. He noticed the small silver necklace she still wore, the same one he had given her during their first Christmas together. She had kept it all these years. His eyes drifted toward the bedside table where a worn leather wallet rested beside a folded sweater. Tucked carefully beneath the wallet was a faded photograph. Nathan picked it up gently. It showed 3 smiling faces standing beneath autumn trees. Claire, little Grace, and himself. The picture had been taken nearly 7 years earlier at a charity picnic his company had sponsored, back when everything still felt possible. His chest tightened. Claire had carried that photograph with her all this time. He carefully returned it to exactly the same place before reaching for the edge of the blanket. "I should have come sooner," he whispered, not expecting an answer. Claire remained asleep, but the faintest hint of a peaceful smile touched her lips, almost as though somewhere beneath the quiet stillness she had already heard that he finally had. When Nathan quietly stepped back into the family lounge, Grace had fallen asleep with her head resting against the arm of the blue chair, her small fingers still wrapped around the worn white rabbit. One of the pediatric volunteers had draped a soft blanket over her shoulders, careful not to wake her. Nathan stood there for a long moment, watching the peaceful rise and fall of her breathing. It struck him that children somehow managed to sleep even when the adults around them felt as though the world had stopped turning. The volunteer smiled gently. "She waited almost 3 hours before she finally closed her eyes," she whispered. "She kept asking if you were really coming." Nathan nodded quietly. "Thank you for staying with her." "She made it easy," the volunteer replied. "She spent most of the evening telling me how her mother says every difficult night eventually becomes a sunrise." Nathan looked toward Grace again. That sounded exactly like Claire. She had always found hope in places where other people only saw disappointment. Even during the hardest seasons of their lives together, she somehow believed tomorrow deserved another chance. The volunteer quietly excused herself, leaving Nathan alone with the sleeping child. He carefully sat in the chair beside her, making as little noise as possible. Grace shifted slightly in her sleep, and the stuffed rabbit slipped from her lap. Nathan gently picked it up before it reached the floor. The toy had clearly been repaired many times. One ear had been sewn back together with pale blue thread, and the faded fabric carried the unmistakable signs of years of love. Tucked inside one of the rabbit's tiny pockets was a folded piece of paper. Nathan hesitated for a moment before carefully removing it, intending only to keep it from falling out. It was a child's drawing made with colored pencils. 3 stick figures stood beneath a bright yellow sun. One was labeled Mommy. One was labeled Grace. The tallest figure wore a blue necktie and was labeled Nathan. His chest tightened as he turned the drawing over. In careful handwriting that was unmistakably Claire's, one sentence filled the back of the page. "Kind people never truly leave our hearts." Nathan slowly folded the picture exactly as he had found it and placed it back inside the rabbit's pocket. He leaned back, overwhelmed by emotions he had spent years teaching himself not to feel. Success had trained him to solve problems with logic, numbers, and contracts. Yet nothing in his business career had prepared him for a 5-year-old girl who still believed he belonged in her family picture. A few minutes later, Dr. Harris returned carrying another folder. "There is one more thing," he said quietly. Nathan stood. "Of course." The doctor opened the file to a page marked with Claire's signature. These are her updated emergency instructions. We review them every year. Nathan glanced down. The first page listed medications, allergies, and insurance information. Then his eyes stopped on a handwritten paragraph near the bottom. If I am ever unable to make decisions for Grace, please contact Nathan Walker immediately. He will always put her first. Nathan stared at the words until they blurred. She wrote this recently? He asked softly. Dr. Harris nodded. 3 months ago. Nathan looked up in disbelief. She still believed that after all this time? Mr. Walker, the doctor replied gently. People do not write something like that unless they trust it with their whole heart. Before Nathan could answer, Grace stirred awake and blinked sleepily around the room. The first thing she looked for was him. When she saw him standing nearby, a relieved smile spread across her face. You stayed, she whispered. Nathan walked over and gently handed her the stuffed rabbit. I told you I came, Grace. She hugged the rabbit tightly before reaching out her free hand. Without thinking, Nathan took it. Her tiny fingers wrapped around his with complete confidence, as though there had never been a reason to doubt he would still be there. In that quiet hospital lounge, surrounded by silence and soft light, Nathan realized something that frightened him more than the midnight phone call ever had. He had spent 6 years believing Claire had erased him from her life, while all along she had been teaching the person she loved most in the world that if everything else failed, Nathan Walker would come. Morning arrived quietly through the hospital windows, replacing the darkness with pale bands of sunlight that stretched across the polished floor. Nathan had not gone home. His tailored suit jacket rested over the back of a chair, his tie had been loosened hours earlier, and an untouched cup of coffee had long since turned cold. None of it mattered. Every time he considered leaving for even a few minutes, he looked toward Grace and realized he could not bring himself to walk away. Around 7 o'clock, Grace slowly opened her eyes and looked around the family lounge with the sleepy confusion only children carried after waking in unfamiliar places. The moment she saw Nathan still sitting nearby, her face relaxed into a gentle smile. You stayed all night, she whispered. Nathan smiled back. I told you I would. Grace climbed down from the chair, hugging her stuffed rabbit beneath one arm before walking over to him. Mommy says people always show you who they are by what they do, not by what they say. Nathan felt the quiet wisdom in those words settle over him. Claire had always believed actions carried more truth than promises. Grace looked toward the hallway leading to her mother's room. Can we go see her? Before Nathan could answer, a nurse entered with a reassuring smile. Your mother is still resting, sweetheart, but she is doing better this morning. She needs a little more time. Grace nodded bravely, although disappointment flickered briefly across her face. Nathan knelt beside her. How about breakfast first? Grace's eyes brightened slightly. Can hospitals make pancakes? Nathan laughed softly for the first time since receiving the midnight phone call. I am not sure, but I think we can find something almost as good. A short while later, they sat together in the hospital cafeteria. Grace carefully arranged slices of banana across her oatmeal until they formed the shape of a smiling face. Nathan watched quietly, realizing how natural the moment felt despite the circumstances. Mommy says food tastes happier if you smile at it first, Grace explained. Nathan remembered Claire saying something almost identical years ago when they had shared inexpensive breakfasts before work. Back then, they had very little money, yet somehow those mornings had always felt rich. As Grace finished eating, she reached into the small backpack resting beside her chair and pulled out a folded envelope decorated with tiny flowers drawn in colored pencil. Mommy told me to keep this safe, she said. She said I could only give it to you if we ever met again. Nathan accepted the envelope carefully, surprised by the tremble in his own hands. Grace returned to coloring quietly while he unfolded the letter. The paper was worn around the edges, as though it had been carried for a very long time. Claire's familiar handwriting immediately brought back memories he thought had disappeared forever. Nathan, if you are reading this, life probably surprised both of us again. I hope you know that I never kept your name because I expected you to fix my problems. I kept it because, despite everything that happened between us, I never stopped believing in the man you were before success convinced you that carrying every burden alone was strength. I wanted Grace to grow up believing that good people exist, and I could never honestly teach her that lesson if I pretended you had never been one of them. Please do not blame yourself for the years we lost. Just take care of her if she ever needs you. That will always be enough." Nathan lowered the letter slowly, unable to speak. Every assumption he had carried for 6 years began to unravel. He had believed Claire resented him. He had convinced himself she wanted nothing to do with him. Yet every line of the letter revealed something entirely different. She had never asked him for money, influence, or another chance. She had asked only that he remain the kind man she once loved. Grace looked up from her coloring book. "Mommy writes nice letters," she said proudly. Nathan smiled through eyes that had grown unexpectedly wet. "Yes," he answered quietly. "She always has." At that very moment, Dr. Harris appeared at the cafeteria entrance with an encouraging expression. He walked toward them and said the words Nathan had been hoping to hear since midnight. "Mr. Walker, Claire is awake, and she is asking to see both of you." Grace slipped her small hand into Nathan's as they followed Dr. Harris through the quiet hallway. The little girl walked with surprising confidence, though every few steps she looked up at him as if making certain he was still there. Nathan gently squeezed her hand each time she glanced his way. It was a silent promise he had never expected to make. Outside Claire's room, Dr. Harris paused before opening the door. "She is awake, but she is still recovering," he said softly. "Please keep the visit short. She needs rest more than anything else." Nathan nodded. Grace held her stuffed rabbit a little tighter. The doctor quietly stepped aside, allowing them to enter first. Morning sunlight filtered through the window, replacing the harshness of the previous night's emergency lights with a warm golden glow. Claire slowly turned her head toward the door the moment she heard it open. Her face remained pale from exhaustion, yet her eyes softened immediately when she saw Grace. "Hi, sweetheart," she whispered. Grace hurried carefully to the bedside without letting go of Nathan's hand until the very last second. She leaned forward and hugged her mother as gently as a child possibly could. "I missed you," she said. Claire kissed the top of her daughter's blonde hair. "I missed you too." Only after making sure Grace was smiling did Claire lift her eyes toward Nathan. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. 6 years of unanswered questions rested silently between them. Nathan noticed that her eyes still carried the same quiet kindness he remembered from long ago. Claire studied him just as carefully. His expensive suit, his tired expression, the faint shadows beneath his eyes from a sleepless night. He looked successful, composed, and strangely familiar all at once. Finally, Claire offered the smallest smile. "You came," she said. Nathan answered just as quietly. "You asked me to." Claire lowered her eyes for a moment before looking back at him. "I knew you would." Nathan felt every carefully constructed wall inside him begin to crack. "Claire, what?" She seemed to understand exactly what he meant. "Why was your name still there?" Nathan nodded slowly. Claire reached toward the bedside table where the familiar leather wallet rested. "Because some things never stopped being true." Nathan looked at her without speaking. Claire continued in a calm voice that carried no anger, only honesty. "People think trust disappears after a relationship ends. Mine never did. We stopped being together. We never stopped knowing who each other really were." Nathan struggled to find words. "I thought you wanted nothing to do with me." Claire smiled sadly. "If that had been true, would I have taught Grace your name?" Nathan glanced toward the little girl, who had quietly climbed into the visitor chair beside the bed and was now coloring another smiling dinosaur. Claire followed his gaze. "She has known about you for years." Nathan looked back at Claire in surprise. "What did you tell her?" Claire answered without hesitation. "That once there was a man who always made people feel safe. That life became complicated. That sometimes good people make painful decisions because they believe they are protecting someone they love." Nathan slowly shook his head. "You should not have protected my reputation after everything that happened." Claire met his eyes steadily. "I was protecting Grace's heart, not your reputation. Children deserve to believe goodness exists." Silence returned, but it no longer felt cold. It felt like two people standing at the edge of a conversation they should have had years earlier. A nurse quietly entered to check Claire's vital signs before smiling warmly at Grace. "Your mommy is doing very well today." Grace beamed with relief. "I knew she would." The nurse finished her routine checks before turning toward Nathan. "Mr. Walker, thank you for staying with Grace last night. She never once felt alone." Nathan looked toward the little girl. "She made that very easy." Grace smiled proudly before reaching for both adults at once. She held her mother's hand with one tiny hand, and reached toward Nathan with the other. Without thinking, he accepted it. Claire looked down at the simple gesture, her eyes filling with quiet emotion. For one brief moment, nothing else existed beyond that hospital room. No lost years, no misunderstandings, no painful memories. Only three hands gently connected by a child who had never stopped believing they belonged together somehow. The quiet peace inside Claire's hospital room lasted only until Grace fell asleep again in the visitor chair, her stuffed rabbit tucked beneath one arm and a half-finished dinosaur drawing resting in her lap. A nurse gently carried the coloring book to the bedside table before dimming the lights. She finally wore herself out, she whispered with a smile. Claire watched her daughter for a long moment before turning back toward Nathan. The room suddenly felt much quieter without Grace's cheerful voice filling every corner. Nathan remained standing near the window, uncertain whether he should stay or leave. Claire noticed his hesitation immediately. "You do not have to go," she said softly. He looked back at her. "I also do not want to make this harder for you." Claire smiled faintly. "If I wanted distance, I would never have written your name on those forms." Nathan slowly returned to the chair beside her bed. Neither of them rushed to fill the silence. It had taken 6 years to arrive at this conversation. A few extra moments no longer seemed important. Finally, Nathan spoke the question that had followed him since the midnight phone call. "Why did we let 6 years disappear?" Claire rested quietly against her pillow before answering. "Because we both believed we were protecting the other person." Nathan frowned slightly. Claire continued with calm honesty. "You believed your company needed every hour of your life. I believed asking you to choose between your dreams and our future would only make you resent me." Nathan shook his head slowly. "I never wanted to choose." Claire looked toward the window where soft morning light touched the glass. "I know that now." Nathan's voice became quieter. "Then why did you leave?" Claire closed her eyes briefly, gathering memories she had not spoken aloud in years. "Do you remember the night before your company expanded to New York?" Nathan nodded immediately. He remembered every detail. Endless phone calls, investors waiting, a delayed dinner, Claire quietly packing an overnight bag. He had assumed she was angry because he canceled another weekend together. Claire opened her eyes again. "I had already decided to tell you something important that night." Nathan leaned forward slightly. "What was it?" Claire's fingers rested gently on the blanket. "I had just learned I was pregnant." Nathan felt every sound in the room disappear. Claire continued before he could interrupt. "I came to your office, but your assistant told me you had already left for the airport after the emergency board meeting." Nathan searched his memory. He remembered that trip. A storm had forced the company jet to leave earlier than planned. His phone battery had died during the flight. He had not spoken to anyone until the following morning. Claire gave a small, bittersweet smile. "I waited several days before trying again. But every time I saw how much pressure you were carrying, I convinced myself there would never be a right moment." Nathan lowered his eyes. "Claire," she gently raised one hand, asking him to let her finish. "Then the newspaper articles started calling you the youngest billionaire in the state. Everyone wanted something from you. Investors, reporters, business partners." She took a slow breath. "I looked at that life and wondered where a frightened young mother would fit into it." Nathan whispered almost to himself. "You should have told me." Claire's eyes filled with quiet emotion. "I know." Nathan looked toward the sleeping Grace. "She is." Claire nodded gently before he could finish the sentence. "Yes." Nathan's breath caught. He stared at the little girl sleeping peacefully only a few feet away. Her smile, the way she tilted her head while asking questions, even the habit of folding one leg beneath herself while sitting in a chair. Tiny details suddenly rearranged themselves into an overwhelming truth. Tears filled his eyes before he realized they were there. Claire reached for his hand with quiet tenderness. "I never kept her from you because I wanted to punish you," she whispered. "I stayed away because I truly believed I had already missed my chance to tell you the truth." Nathan looked at Grace again, then back at Claire. 6 lost years suddenly became more painful than every business failure he had ever feared. The greatest opportunity of his life had not been a company he built. It had been a little girl who had spent 6 birthdays growing up without ever knowing why the man she trusted most had never been there. The afternoon sunlight drifted slowly across the hospital room as Nathan remained seated beside the window, unable to take his eyes off Grace. She sat cross-legged on the visitor couch, completely absorbed in teaching her stuffed rabbit how to color inside the lines. Every few minutes, she glanced toward her mother to make sure Claire was comfortable before returning to her masterpiece. Nathan noticed the habit immediately. Claire used to do exactly the same thing whenever someone she loved was hurting. She never stopped checking on them, even while pretending everything was normal. Claire watched the two of them quietly, a gentle smile softening the exhaustion that still lingered across her face. "She likes having you here," Claire whispered. Nathan looked toward Grace, who was now explaining to the rabbit why dinosaurs should always smile, because they frighten people less that way. He smiled without realizing it. "I like being here too." The word surprised even him. For years he had convinced himself that success meant filling every hour with work, every calendar with meetings, every silence with another goal. Yet sitting inside a simple hospital room beside the family he had unknowingly lost felt more meaningful than any achievement waiting in his office downtown. Claire studied him carefully. "You look different." Nathan laughed softly. "Older?" "No," she answered. "Quieter." He considered that for a moment before nodding. "Maybe I finally stopped running fast enough to hear my own thoughts." Claire looked out the window where autumn leaves drifted slowly across the courtyard below. "We both spent too much time believing we had to carry everything alone." Nathan lowered his eyes. "I should have searched for you." Claire gently shook her head. "Perhaps, but I could have called too." Neither of them tried to assign blame anymore. Tom had already done enough of that. Grace suddenly climbed down from the couch carrying her newest drawing. "Can I show you something?" she asked excitedly. Nathan accepted the paper with both hands. 3 figures stood beneath a bright blue sky. One wore a business suit. One wore a light yellow dress. The smallest held both of their hands. Above them floated a smiling sun wearing sunglasses. "Who are they?" Nathan asked, already knowing the answer. Grace grinned proudly. "That is Mommy. That is you. And that is me." Nobody is standing by themselves anymore. Claire quietly covered her mouth as tears gathered in her eyes. Nathan looked at the drawing for several long seconds before folding it carefully enough that no crease touched the smiling faces. "Would it be all right if I kept this?" Grace nodded enthusiastically. "Yes. So you remember us when you go back to work." Nathan looked directly at her. "Grace, I do not think I ever want to forget either of you again." The little girl smiled as though the promise sounded completely natural. To her, trust had always been simple. Adults complicated it. Claire reached across the bed and gently rested her hand over Nathan's. "Whatever happens next," she said quietly, "let it begin with honesty this time." Nathan turned his hand over and gently held hers. "It will." Outside the hospital room, the ordinary sounds of nurses, visitors, and rolling carts continued without interruption. Inside, however, something much quieter had changed. The years they could never recover no longer stood between them like a wall. They had become a bridge leading toward everything they still had time to build together. The next several days passed with a quiet rhythm that felt unfamiliar to all 3 of them. Claire grew stronger with each morning, and the doctors became increasingly optimistic about her recovery. Nathan adjusted his schedule without hesitation, moving executive meetings online and delegating responsibilities he once believed only he could handle. Every afternoon he returned to the hospital carrying a different children's book or a small puzzle for Grace. She greeted him with the same bright smile each day, never questioning whether he would come back because, in her mind, he already belonged there. On Thursday afternoon, Grace insisted they build a castle from paper cups in the hospital family lounge. Nathan, who had negotiated billion-dollar contracts with complete confidence, discovered that constructing a crooked paper castle under the direction of a determined 5-year-old required far greater patience. Every time one of the towers collapsed, Grace burst into laughter instead of frustration. "That is how castles learn to stand stronger," she explained with complete certainty. Nathan smiled, realizing how different life looked through her eyes. Claire watched them from the doorway after finishing a short walk with her physical therapist. Seeing Grace laugh so freely while Nathan knelt on the floor pretending to defend the tiny castle from imaginary dragons filled her with a mixture of gratitude and quiet sadness for the years they had all lost. Nathan noticed her standing there and immediately walked over. "You should be resting," he said gently. Claire smiled. "Watching the 2 of you might be the best medicine I have received all week." They walked slowly together down the hallway, while Grace remained happily occupied with her castle under a volunteer's supervision. For the first time since their reunion, neither of them spoke about the past. Instead, they talked about Grace's favorite books, the stray cat that visited Claire's apartment every evening, and the community garden where Grace insisted every flower deserved its own name. The ordinary conversation felt extraordinary because it reminded them of the simple companionship they had once shared before fear and misunderstanding had taken its place. As they reached a quiet window overlooking the hospital courtyard, Nathan finally stopped walking. "Claire," he said softly, "I cannot change what happened. I cannot give Grace back the birthdays I missed, or give you back the years you carried everything alone. But if you will allow me, I want to be part of your lives from this day forward. Not because I feel guilty, because I love the daughter I never knew I had, and because I never truly stopped caring about you." Claire looked at him for a long moment before answering. "I do not need promises made from regret." Nathan nodded. "Neither do I." She reached for his hand. "Then let us begin with something smaller." He waited quietly. "Show up tomorrow," she said with a gentle smile. "Then the day after that, and the day after that." Trust is not rebuilt in one conversation. It grows one ordinary day at a time. Nathan smiled with relief. "I can do that." Later that evening, Grace proudly carried her paper castle into Claire's room. She placed it carefully on the windowsill where the setting sun painted it with warm golden light. "Now everybody has a home," she announced happily. Nathan and Claire exchanged a quiet glance before looking back at their daughter. Neither of them knew exactly what the future would hold. There would still be difficult conversations, legal arrangements, missed memories, and new challenges waiting beyond the hospital walls. But for the first time in many years, they were no longer facing those questions alone. Sometimes healing did not begin with grand gestures or perfect answers. Sometimes it began with a paper castle, a child's unwavering faith, and two adults finally choosing to arrive for each other one ordinary day at a time. 2 weeks later, the hospital discharged Claire beneath a bright autumn sky that felt almost unreal after so many days spent inside quiet hallways and softly lit rooms. Grace skipped toward the parking lot carrying her stuffed rabbit in one hand and the paper castle, now carefully reinforced with tape by the pediatric volunteers, in the other. Nathan walked beside them with an overnight bag over one shoulder, insisting on carrying every heavier item despite Claire's playful protests that she was perfectly capable of holding her own suitcase. "The doctor said you should avoid unnecessary strain," he reminded her with a gentle smile. Claire laughed softly. "You memorized the discharge instructions." Nathan shrugged. "Every single one." Grace looked up proudly. "I told Mommy you listened very well." The drive to Claire's neighborhood was quiet in the most comfortable way. Golden leaves drifted across the windshield as they entered the modest suburban street, where small front porches displayed pumpkins and flower boxes. Nathan had spent years arriving at luxury hotels and corporate towers, yet somehow parking beside Claire's simple duplex felt more meaningful than any destination on his calendar. Inside, the apartment reflected the same warmth Claire had always carried. Children's drawings covered one wall. Books filled mismatched shelves. A tiny kitchen overlooked a small garden where late-season flowers still bloomed despite the cooling weather. Grace immediately ran to the window. "The stray cat came back," she announced happily. A gray tabby sat patiently on the fence as though greeting them home. Claire smiled. "She always visits when someone needs company." Nathan watched the scene quietly, realizing how much life had continued without him. There were routines, traditions, favorite mugs, bedtime stories, and ordinary moments that had shaped Grace's childhood. Instead of feeling jealous of those years, he felt grateful that Claire had filled them with so much love. That evening, Nathan prepared a simple dinner while Claire rested on the living room couch as instructed by her physician. Grace insisted on helping by arranging napkins and placing 3 glasses on the table with exaggerated concentration. During the meal, conversation flowed easily. Grace described school projects, neighborhood adventures, and her dream of becoming a veterinarian because, in her words, animals cannot tell people where it hurts. Nathan listened carefully to every story, asking questions that made her smile even wider. Claire watched them from across the table, noticing how naturally they fit into the same conversation. It was not perfect. It was simply honest. After dinner, Grace disappeared into her room and returned carrying a small memory box decorated with painted stars. She placed it carefully on Nathan's lap. "Mommy saved these for me," she explained. "But I think you should see them too." Nathan slowly opened the box. Inside were birthday photographs, handmade Father's Day cards that had never been delivered, tiny handprints made from colorful paint, and dozens of folded notes written in a child's careful handwriting. One card read, "Dear Nathan, Mommy says you are very brave. I hope one day I can tell you thank you." Nathan gently closed the box as emotion tightened his throat. Claire reached across the table and rested her hand over his. "I never wanted her to grow up believing she had been abandoned," she said quietly. "I wanted her to know that sometimes people become separated by circumstances they do not yet understand." Nathan looked at Grace, who smiled innocently back at him. "I cannot change the years I missed," he said softly. "But if you will let me, I would like to earn every year that comes next." Grace answered before Claire could speak. She walked around the table and wrapped her small arms around him. "You already came when Mommy needed you," she whispered. "That is how I knew you would find us." Nathan held her gently, understanding that forgiveness sometimes arrived with extraordinary simplicity. Claire wiped away quiet tears, not because the past had disappeared, but because the future no longer felt empty. Outside, the evening breeze carried fallen leaves across the front yard, while inside the little home, three hearts that had once traveled separate roads slowly began learning the ordinary, beautiful rhythm of becoming a family together one day at a time. Winter arrived quietly, bringing crisp mornings and clear blue skies that seemed to mirror the calm slowly returning to their lives. Claire regained her strength week by week, and her physician finally encouraged her to resume limited hours at the community health clinic where she had worked before her hospitalization. Nathan insisted on driving her the first morning back. She smiled when he opened the passenger door, amused that the billionaire who once rushed between board meetings now seemed perfectly content waiting outside a modest neighborhood clinic with a cup of coffee in his hand. "You know," she teased gently, "your executives probably think you disappeared." Nathan laughed. "They survived before I arrived this morning. I think they will survive until lunchtime." Claire shook her head with a smile she had not worn in years. It was lighter now, no longer weighed down by quiet loneliness. Grace adjusted to the new rhythm even faster than either adult. Every Wednesday afternoon, Nathan picked her up from school. They completed homework together at a small bakery near the park before walking home, always stopping to greet the elderly florist who insisted on giving Grace one free daisy each week. The routine became ordinary, and that was exactly what made it extraordinary. Nathan discovered that ordinary moments carried a kind of happiness no business victory had ever given him. One Saturday morning, Grace invited both adults to her elementary school's Winter Family Festival. Parents filled the gymnasium, children proudly displayed handmade crafts, and holiday music drifted through the halls. Grace rushed from one activity to another, introducing Nathan without hesitation. "This is my dad," she said naturally to her teacher before taking his hand and leading him toward her classroom. Nathan stopped for a brief moment, surprised by the simple certainty in her voice. He looked toward Claire, uncertain whether he should correct the introduction. Claire simply smiled and gave the smallest nod. There was no confusion in Grace's heart. She had already decided where he belonged. During the afternoon, the students presented a short performance about kindness. At the end, each child was asked to hand a small paper star to someone who had changed their life that year. Grace walked across the room carrying 2 stars instead of 1. She placed the first in Claire's hand. "For always making me feel safe," she whispered. Then she turned toward Nathan and carefully placed the second star in his palm. "For finding your way back." Nathan looked down at the tiny paper star decorated with uneven glitter and colorful crayon lines. It cost almost nothing to make, yet it became one of the most valuable gifts he had ever received. Later that evening, after Grace had fallen asleep on the couch with a storybook resting across her lap, Nathan and Claire quietly cleaned the kitchen together. Snow drifted gently outside the window while warm light filled the small room. Claire dried the last plate before setting the towel aside. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the hospital had called someone else?" she asked softly. Nathan looked toward the sleeping little girl before answering. "I think about it almost every day." Claire rested her hand lightly against the countertop. That night could have become the worst memory of our lives. Nathan gently reached for her hand. Instead, it became the night we finally stopped running from the truth. She smiled, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and peace. I spent years believing that trust meant holding on to the past. Nathan intertwined his fingers with hers. Now I think it means believing someone can become better than they used to be. Claire nodded. And you have. The room grew quiet again, but this silence carried comfort instead of distance. Outside, snow continued falling across the neighborhood, covering old footprints until the sidewalks looked untouched. Nathan watched the white flakes settle beneath the streetlights and realized that life rarely offered anyone the chance to begin again. Yet sometimes, through unexpected grace, it quietly covered yesterday's mistakes just enough to let tomorrow begin with hope instead of regret. Nearly 1 year later, the first warm days of spring returned to the neighborhood, carrying the scent of blooming flowers through open windows and reminding everyone that even the longest winters eventually surrendered to light. Grace raced across the small community park wearing bright yellow rain boots, even though there had not been a single puddle for days. She insisted they were lucky boots because they had carried her through the hardest year of her life. Nathan laughed as he chased after her, pretending he could never catch up. Claire watched them from a nearby bench with a paperback novel resting unopened in her lap. There had been a time when she believed moments like this belonged only to other families. Now they unfolded so naturally that she sometimes caught herself smiling before realizing why. Grace suddenly stopped beneath a young maple tree and pointed toward the sky. "Do you remember the paper castle?" she asked. Nathan smiled immediately. "I still have one of the paper windows in my desk drawer." Grace looked delighted. "Really?" He nodded. "It reminds me that the strongest homes are not always the biggest ones." Claire quietly joined them beneath the tree. She slipped her hand into Nathan's, a gesture that no longer felt uncertain or hesitant. It simply felt right. Over the past year, they had rebuilt their lives one ordinary day after another. There had been difficult conversations, patient forgiveness, and countless small choices to trust again. Nathan never rushed Claire to forget the past, and Claire never asked Nathan to become someone he was not. Instead, they learned that love often returned not through dramatic promises, but through consistency, kindness, and showing up every single day. A few weeks later, Mercy General Hospital invited their family to attend the dedication of a new family resource center funded through Nathan's charitable foundation. The project had begun only months after Claire's hospitalization. Instead of placing his own name above the entrance, Nathan chose a different inscription carved into polished stone. Grace noticed it first. She slowly read each word aloud. The Claire Bennett Family Support Center. For every family waiting together through the longest nights. Claire looked at him with complete surprise. "You never told me." Nathan smiled softly. "Because it was never about recognition. It was about remembering the night that changed everything." Doctors, nurses, volunteers, and former patients gathered inside the bright new building. Dr. Harris approached with the same warm smile they remembered from that unforgettable night nearly a year earlier. "I had a feeling all three of you would come back together one day," he said. Grace immediately hugged him before proudly showing him a new drawing. This time there were no hospital beds or worried faces. The picture showed a family standing beneath a giant maple tree with a smiling sun overhead. Dr. Harris studied it for a moment before looking at Nathan. "She draws happier pictures now." Nathan glanced toward Grace. "She lives happier days now." As the ceremony ended, families slowly drifted outside into the afternoon sunshine. Grace ran ahead, laughing as flower petals floated through the air. Claire rested her head briefly against Nathan's shoulder. "You know," she said quietly, "if the hospital had called anyone else that night, none of this would have happened." Nathan looked toward the entrance where the engraved words reflected the sunlight. "I used to think my greatest achievement was building successful companies." He paused, watching Grace wave excitedly from across the garden. "Now I know my greatest achievement was answering one phone call." Claire smiled, her eyes bright with gratitude rather than sadness. They walked hand in hand toward Grace, who reached for both of them without hesitation. Together they continued down the garden path, their shadows stretching side by side beneath the afternoon sun. Sometimes life changes because of carefully planned decisions. Sometimes it changes because one unexpected moment reminds people who they have always been. And sometimes the greatest miracle is not that someone comes back after being lost. It is discovering that trust quietly waited for them all along, patient enough to lead them home when they were finally ready to follow it.